BetOnline.ag is today's presenting sponsor of the Bleav in Steelers show. And March is here, which means you can get in on the college basketball actions, from which teams will make the Final Four to which teams are going to go on a Cinderella run. You've got that. The NHL and NBA playoffs are also right around the corner, so get in on the action today over at BetOnline.ag. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, let's get to today's guest. All right, former Steelers linebacker Arthur Moats is here. You can check out his work over at the Arthur Moats Experience. Arthur, it is good to see you again, my friend, and happy belated birthday to you.
Hey, man, appreciate you as always. And yeah, man, definitely becoming, more of a common theme between me and you, but most definitely enjoying these conversations that we've been having, man.
Absolutely. We'll get into the Steelers and the Mason Rudolph signing and everything, but
We have
I hope your birthday. Yeah, I hope your yeah. I hope your birthday went well. Do anything to celebrate the big day.
Oh, man, absolutely, man. Spent it with family, got a chance to, kind of get off the grid a little bit. And then went and had me one of those really, really nice steaks. Was it them Wagyus? That's what they calling it these days. Yeah. Treated myself just a little bit, man. So yes, without a doubt, man, it was a great weekend, man. Felt the love, not just from my family, but from the fans and the fans of, Steeler Nation as well, man. They definitely reached out in a major way, man. I do appreciate each and every one of you all for that love.
I saw on I think it was your Instagram, you're a medium well guy. I'm gonna say you're wrong, but when I saw that, and I'm like, Arthur, no, medium rare is the way to do it. Like, I don't need the cow still mooing, but I saw medium well, and I was like, what is my guy doing here?
Hey, look, man, I like my food how I like my food, man. Hey, I've seen some of these dudes where, like you said, it's still mooing on the plate. In fact, RIP, but my father-in-law, that's how he liked his steaks. And I'm just like, yo, I just can't do it, man. So for me, I like a little medium well, or if I feel bougie, medium plus, sure.
Okay. All right, we're gonna get into the Steelers. The last time we talked, Skylar Thompson was the only quarterback on the roster. Mason Rudolph is coming back. What'd you make of the Mason Rudolph signing?
I mean, honestly, it was underwhelming when I initially saw it, because at that moment, we're all thinking, what? Rodgers or Russell Wilson? It was going to be one of those two. So for it to be Mason out of that conversation, it did feel a little bit, underwhelming in the moment. But as I had a chance to process it, I'm like, oh, I love this move. And I loved it for a multitude of reasons. First off, you look at the price point, 2 years, $8 million, 4.5 guaranteed. I don't know if you're seeing what they're projecting Aaron Rodgers for, but it's a lot more than 2 years, $8 million with just 4.5 guaranteed. So that was the first thing that stood out. The second thing I had to think of was, what was our relationship with Mason Rudolph? Well, the last time he was here, he left with his credit extremely high because of the 4-game ending of the season that he had when he replaced Kenny Pickett, won those final 3, and then led us into the postseason versus the Bills, where he even had moments where he looked good in that game. So I thought of that and I said, well, man, at one point we were even considering, why not have him re-sign, compete with Kenny Pickett, and see who can be QB1 out of that group. It just so happened that the Russell Wilson and Justin Fields scenario and allowing Mason to leave in free agency kind of changed that trajectory. But now, as I sit here, I'm saying to myself, we get a chance to get that. Now, granted, it's a year removed, and we did see Tennessee where they were up and down in terms of the results for Mason exclusively. But I do feel confident in knowing that, number one, he is at worst a high-level QB2, a competent backup, a guy that we feel can get us out of a stadium. But the upside part is, well, what if he can do more of what we saw when he ended his tenure here in Pittsburgh? Because now, instead of it just being George Pickens and Deontay Johnson and a young Calvin Austin, now we're talking about a DK Metcalf, a lot more developed George Pickens, a lot more developed Calvin Austin, a lot more developed Pat Freiermuth. And we're going to be looking to see what else we might potentially add via the draft. So now we're talking about Mason being in, a scenario where he's not forced to make this Honda Civic compete versus a Ferrari. No, now you got a chance to drive a Ferrari versus other Ferraris. Now let's see if you're that gifted, because I think with the correct set of skill, or with the correct set of tools, Mason is skilled enough to maximize what we do have right now. And that's the part to me, that gives me just a little bit more excitement and leverage with these other quarterbacks that we're waiting on right now and continue to wait on and have been waiting on all weekend. And who knows how much longer we're going to continue to wait on them. But at least with Mason, I feel like it gives the Steelers a lot more leverage. It gives them confidence that we're not just stuck waiting on one person and putting ourselves in a compromising position that if this guy doesn't sign, what are we going to do? Now we do have a legitimate plan that if that doesn't work, we can go Mason, draft a quarterback, and let it play out the way that, it kind of unveils. But to me, I just think that this gives the Steelers a lot more leverage in the scenario right now.
Yeah, lot to unpack there. I had someone in my YouTube comments be like, Mason, if he's making $4 per year, he is not 10 times worse than Rodgers if Rodgers makes $40 per year.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put it like that, it's like, is he going to be that much worse than either Rodgers or Wilson?
Mm-hmm.
And he's also younger than those two players. So initially I was like, okay, cool. Mason Rudolph, like you said, capable backup. I'm with you there. To have him go the full season, though, it's like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because, okay, bring in Aaron Rodgers or bring back Russell Wilson. But again, it goes to what price point? And then my brain goes to, okay, if everyone's still waiting for Rodgers, two things when it comes to Wilson. Number one, if the Steelers really wanted him back, I feel like he'd already be re-signed. But then second of all, will it reach a point where Wilson says, enough with having to wait for Rodgers and what he's going to do. I'm going to be the next domino to fall, and I'm going to preempt Rodgers, even though everything's at a standstill waiting for Aaron Rodgers right now. Yeah. I'm curious if there are other quarterbacks in the league saying, I'm sick of waiting. I want to figure out what I'm going to do. And I'd rather be proactive in making a decision versus having to wait for Rodgers for how that's going to influence what I end up deciding to do.
Yeah, that's very legitimate. And when you think about from Russ's perspective, I mean, just think of it from a human element. As soon as the season ended, he was the first guy to go on record saying that he wanted to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, that he wanted to come back here, that he loved the organization, that this was the only team he was focused on. We heard that at the Pro Bowl. His messaging had never changed. But at this stage, now we've heard it shift, largely due to the fact that the Steelers at one point said that Fields or Wilson were going to be the priorities. How are you the priorities when nobody else could talk to you up until free agency began, but we don't get a deal done? So from there, of course, you're going to feel as if, hey, man, there was a breakdown in communication. I've been slighted in some capacity. And now that Justin Fields is gone, everything should say that I'm the guy that we're going to get this deal done with. But now we've seen how that's played out, right? Aaron Rodgers has bumped the line, and now he's become the new priority. So once again, if you're Russ, you go from, man, I want to be here to, okay, you guys really wanted Justin Fields over me and kind of used me as leverage against him. Now that that's backfired, now you're really in this Aaron Rodgers, sweepstakes, and he's doing the Aaron Rodgers thing where, hey, I'm the prom queen, so you wait on me. And he does have that luxury, but for a guy like Russ, he also feels like, man, I've been the prom queen before as well. I've had a ton of success before as well. I don't necessarily have to wait. And that could easily be changed by the simple lowering of your ask. If Russ is in a negotiation right now and he's asking for 35 and they say, man, 35 is tough, man, I can get Rodgers for 35. Like, let me just see, I'd rather wait on Rodgers. And now he comes back and says, well, I'll take it for 30. Or I'll do it for 27. That changes the perspective, because now we're saying, hey, is Rodgers $10 million better than Russ at this stage? The same way we're saying, hey, is Rodgers $40 million better than, a guy that we making $4 million a year in Mason Rudolph? When you start factoring all of those variables, that does change the dynamic. But for Russ, I can understand 100% why he could easily be taking this approach and now saying, I want to take the initiative. I want to be in the driver's seat, and I don't want to wait on Rodgers. And I don't want to wait on the Steelers as they wait on Rodgers as well. And that's the unfortunate, game that the Steelers have played. And this is kind of where we're at with it right now. But we are treading in some dangerous waters from my perspective.
Yes. And to win prom queen, Arthur, you got to do a little bit of politicking. And what I mean by this.
Yeah.
So the messaging was, I want to be a Steeler, I want to be a Steeler. There was also the report that surfaced that Wilson couldn't change the plays in audible in his relationship with Arthur Smith. Let me just put this out there, and this is more rhetorical than anything. Where do you think that is coming from? Why do you think that report exists? Why do you think that report exists out into the ether?
You don't think the Steelers wanted that out there? You don't think that was from the Steelers side? What? Is that what you're telling me here?
So is the Steelers organization mad about that? I know you take anything too personal in business. It's a dollars and cents game at the end of the day. But that also factors into all of this, where maybe Russell Wilson's not the prom queen that he thinks he is, to use your analogy. So that also factors into all of this. But so here's what I want to ask you ultimately. So if Pittsburgh misses out on Rodgers, if Russell Wilson signs somewhere, what's your plan then? Because dangerous waters is
very dangerous waters.
Free agent market. I do have one solution, but I want to hear what you think Pittsburgh should do.
Yeah, so I got a couple of options, man. My first option is, like I kind of said earlier, I stick with Mason Rudolph. I'm going to sign me another wide receiver. I'm going to sign me another skill player that can give me dynamic playmaking ability, and I'm loading up around my super cheap version of rookie salary quarterback, because I still have a excess of salary cap space and funds that need to be spent, and I can spend those. So I'm taking that approach first, and then I'm going to the draft, and I'm drafting a quarterback. Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. If it's a Shedeur Sanders at 21, great. If it's not, if I'd say Jackson Dart, potentially, great. If not, then I'm looking at Will Howard as well, because I think I could get him maybe a little bit in the middle part of the draft. But I'm leaving out of there with one of those draft picks. I'm having them come in. They're going to compete against Mason. I feel like Mason should win this. And I'm going to allow them to use these weapons that I have around, and we're going to see what this looks like. And after that, we'll reassess at the end of next season. That's my first plan, and that's what I probably love the most. Second option is, all right, there are two people that I consider that I would consider trading for. And they are in varying levels when we're talking about contracts and just where they are career-wise. But the first guy is Kyler Murray. The second guy is Brock Purdy. With Kyler Murray, I prefer him because I'm a fan of his game. I like the dual threat ability. I think that his ability to throw the football while also creating with his legs, but still being a pass-first quarterback, I think ages really well. And I think that he could thrive in a system with Mike Tomlin just leadership around him, because he hasn't had that type of structure in Arizona. So I look at that as the first option, but I think that's going to cost the most because he is the most proven. The next option, like I said, is Brock Purdy. Brock has shown that he is a competent to really good quarterback in this league. He has started in a Super Bowl. He has taken his team to an NFC Championship game twice. But at the same time, I'm going to have to give him a new contract, and I don't know how much San Fran is trying to hold on to him because they are making the weird fire sale moves. But that's a team that I'll be considering, and I'm saying to myself, once again, I have weapons around. I have cap space. Maybe I get the trade done, and I do the Sam Darnold type contract where it looks amazing on paper, but essentially it's a 1-year, $37 million deal. If I can get that out of it, now I get a chance to really assess Brock Purdy to see, were you just the system, or are you actually a really good, legitimate starting quarterback that I can build around and ultimately have you lead my franchise? Those are kind of the ways that I'm viewing it. But like I said, that would be option 3 for me, because I just think that of the risk versus reward, I think that gives me the least, amount of it. Whereas when I think of Kyler Murray, I obviously feel great about it, but I know that's going to cost the most from a premium standpoint. And then with Mason in this draft / loading up around him, I just feel like that's the sweet spot in the middle to me.
I really like the Brock Purdy idea. Murray, I am with you. Think it's going to cost too much, because it's almost like a level up of what you would have with Mason Rudolph this coming year. Of you just need someone to guide the car. We're going to put it on cruise control with all the other souped up options you have around.
Come on now.
You just need to make sure the car stays straight on the interstate. So
We've seen Purdy do that. We've seen him do it.
We've seen him do that. And we also took advantage of when Seattle was having its fire sale. It wasn't just the trade for DK Metcalf. It's trading away Geno Smith. It's getting rid of Tyler Lockett, taking advantage of teams that want to zig while you're zagging or vice versa. So I really like that Purdy idea. I'm with you. I think Murray would cost too much. I think you'd have to just give up too much to acquire him. And the salary's already there, so you'd have to take that on. So I really like that Purdy idea. I hadn't heard that to this point. And again, who knows if he's even available, but it's worth a phone call.
The other part is this. When you're thinking about San Fran, you're going to hit them with, hey, we can give you draft picks. Obviously, you're trying to, get cheaper salary cap wise. Paying this quarterback $40 million, you don't want to do that. Paying him $30 million, you're contemplating if you want to do that. Why don't you just hit the full reset, try to see if you can win again in the draft, and we'll take that off your hands, and we'll obviously be able to set the market for him. And that's the part that I like right now for the Steelers perspective, and why I really would want to go get Purdy, or at least initiate that contract or that conversation. He hasn't set that 40 plus just yet. So what if it's just 30 for him? What if it's 35? We wouldn't know that, obviously, until we get a chance to have those conversations. But once San Fran pays him, it's kind of like Brandon Ayuk right now. That deal is that deal. San Fran paid it, but now if you're trying to move off of him, we're like, man, we don't want that bag now at that price. If we could change the price, I think that changes everything. But when that deal is already set, it makes it less appealing. And that's the other part, like I said, with Purdy that is appealing, and why Kyler Murray, the flip side isn't, because you're going to give up a lot, and he already cost a lot as well.
With Purdy as well, I think about it from, do I want to go back to San Francisco where you just decimated the whole team that went on playoff runs and has had bad injury luck, but he's had success there with a lot of really talented players around him. For 2025, I mean, their team and their roster is going to be much, much different.
Their defense has been gutted. Offense has been gutted.
Okay, I like the Purdy deal. I had two options that were way lower.
Let's say, what you saying on your end, man?
In the draft, I like this world that we're in with the possibility of trading for Brock Purdy. The world I was in, Arthur, was in the draft. Another name, Louisville's Tyler Show. It's a possibility. Day 2, day 3 guy. And then the only other guy out there that I think would serve as Mason's backup would be Patriots quarterback Joe Milton out of Tennessee. And my case for this would be, you've got Drake May there, who's entering his second year. The Patriots just signed Joshua Dobbs for backup money.
Shout out the Dobbs, baby. Yes.
Steelers player, also a former Tennessee quarterback. To me, why carry 3 quarterbacks on your roster when you can get a pickback of some sort? And that's another key to this too, Arthur, of if the Steelers do have to make a trade, all of these compensatory picks that they're going to get in next year's drafts, starting to load up those assets to go see who your quarterback of the future is. If I'm Pittsburgh, take a shot at it this offseason of a trade, maybe a day 2, day 3 quarterback. But then again, don't be afraid to do the same thing next offseason of, even if, say, they go the draft route. Get another guy. Like, I think about the Eagles and Andy Weidl's influence on the Steelers. But, okay, when they brought Jalen Hurts in, they already had Carson Wentz as your first-round pick, and they drafted Hurts in the second round, and everyone's like, well, what are they doing? Hurts is now the guy in Philly. So take multiple swings, take multiple at-bats if you're the Steelers.
I mean,
don't
even
chicken
to a
out 'cause you
degree.
missed out on Pickett. That's my
And I love that idea, and I love what you're saying. I mean, even to a degree, we saw that going back to the, I guess they're the Commanders now, but back when it was RG3 and Kirk Cousins. You swing twice, and I mean, shoot, both of those guys hit. One guy's still playing, and one of the highest paid guys, that have ever played that position in Kirk Cousins. But yeah, when you're talking about the Joe Milton element, we know first off that the Patriots are open to trading him. Those reports came out, I think that was a month ago. And when you bring in Josh Dobbs is the proven version that Joe Milton is trying to develop into, that dual threat version that can throw, that can run. But obviously Joe is a way just mutant type body packaging that hits in, and that's the appealing part about him. the thing that I do like about what you were bringing up with Joe is this too. It wouldn't cost a lot to acquire him either.
Mm-mm.
He was a former 6th-round draft pick, was that a year ago. So it's not going to have a ton that you have the price premium to go get him while you're still getting a chance to tap into that high-end upside if it does develop. But at the same time, worst case, you have a unicorn type guy that if there was an injury at quarterback, it's something very unique that a defense would have to prepare for. And maybe that buys you more time with him to develop. So I like that part as well. And it definitely be probably the cheapest of all the options that we've talked about as well.
With Milton, I saw him at the combine. Guy is a cannon. I started my career in Knoxville when Dobbs was the quarterback. So
Okay.
so you see a little bit.
UT,
I follow
man.
UT.
Yeah.
But with Milton, though, it's just a flick of the wrist. I mean, in terms of just pure arm talent, there's a lot more to quarterback than just arm talent. The dude can launch it like 80 yards with just a flick of the wrist. I mean, he has a cannon. Like the analogy,
He's got some quarterbacks these past couple of goes, man. Yeah.
When he throws the ball through a car wash and it doesn't even get wet, Arthur, I mean, it's just like this dude has an arm. But I'm not going to freak out. Like a lot of people are like, whoa, week 18 against all the Bills backups. Yes, he played well. I think of Matt Flynn back in the day with Seattle, and he got the big deal. He didn't even start a game, and that's how Russell Wilson's career.
Matt Flynn, Horace Jackson, all them dudes, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not going to freak out over one game, but again, it'd be cheap, and at least there's like some upside there where we don't know exactly what he is, and that's what you have to see. I mean, that's what this evaluation is part of.
Because what if it's Cam Newton? What if he turns into Cam Newton? Now you've won. Now you hit the lottery. Yep.
We can dream. We can dream. All right, a few other things to get to before we wrap up here. The Bengals are going to bring back in, have huge contract extensions for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
Yeah.
I think this is good for Joe Burrow's future, but Trey Hendrickson is going to be awfully tough to keep. And I look back at the Week 13 game where Russ lit him up more than 400 yards through the air. Like, Arthur, they might need to sign you on the cheap for their defense. Like, I don't know who's going to be on Cincinnati's defense because all the money's going to Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. Yes, retain your players. I will say this because I've heard other people say this. The Bengals have notoriously been a cheap franchise when it comes to the front office. So keeping their good players is a good thing for them. But I look at it from the glass half full perspective, from Pittsburgh's perspective. Great. I don't know who's playing on defense for the Cincinnati Bengals, and they're going to have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. I'd say at least bottom half comfortably. I'm comfortable saying that. So that's my 2 cents worth. What say you about these extensions to the Bengals wide receivers?
Listen, first off, shout out to the guys getting new money. All right. Shout out to, the second highest paid quarterback all time, and Joe Burrow. Shout out to the highest paid non-quarterback of all time, and Jamar Chase. And then shout out to the highest paid wide receiver too of all time, in T. Higgins. It's a great day to be a skill position player in Cincinnati. Shout out to those dudes. All right. I just want to start it off with that. Great to see. Okay. But my reactions after that were, they are essentially the Mike D'Antoni, Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire Phoenix Suns. They're trying to score 155 and you're going to score 153. Like, that's what this is, man. There is full court. As soon as they come out, they're going to throw the ball 60 times a game. You know what it is. But they've linked into that method, and we saw even at the end of last season, those dudes are capable. They are capable of averaging 30 plus. Now, we know as the teams get better, that's the issue. Can you be great the whole time because your defense is such a liability? And even last year, while they still had some of these good players, remember, Trey Hendrickson was over there, but also Sam Hubbard was over there. You had a Mike Hilton over there. You had some of these other players that we're seeing leave in free agency or leave via, being released and stuff. So now you're really asking yourself, are you guys going to be able to hit on every draft pick that you're going to get? Because that's what you're essentially backing yourself into that corner now, that you're going to have to hit on every defensive draft pick that you get in order for, your team to stay relevant, your team to stay competitive. Because this league has proven time and time again that if you're just one-sided or you have too much on just one element of your game or one element of your team, these coaches, man, these players are good enough to figure you out and ultimately take that away from you. And that's the thing that right now, when I'm looking at Cincinnati, I say, yes, you're going to be able to pass the football at an extremely high level, but there are going to be a lot of flaws in your team. And I'll be interested to see what Zach Taylor is able to come up with, because up until this point, they haven't been able to figure it out defensively just yet. And I don't see how they're going to be able to get even more resources in there when half of your salary cap is tied up in those three players right there. But I'm glad it's on them. I'm glad it's a Cincinnati problem to have, and we applaud them for this problem. So I am happy for it, man. Shout out to Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins on that new money over there, baby. Yes, indeed.
I'm going to add some fuel to this fire here, too, because I got more. Trey Hendrickson is coming off a year where he led the NFL in sacks. I think he's like a tier below the best of the best. So the TJ Watts, the Myles Garretts, the Micah Parsons of the world, but he's awfully good.
Yeah.
I don't see.
You put him at that number 6 category. Like, oh, those are the top 5. You're number 6, man. You're right.
He's right there. He's right there. But so it's not the Higgins and Chase extensions, because ultimately you want to keep Burrow happy.
Yeah.
I understand that. And it's going to be more and more like the NBA than the NFL in that regard. Keep your star quarterback healthy. Hopefully Burrow's the guy for them. They're thinking for the next decade. That's their thought process. But then you're also signing tight end Mike Gesicki to a 3-year deal where he's getting about $8 million per year. Why make that deal when you could bring in someone cheaper at tight end to then retain Hendrickson?
Yep.
Again, all the money's on the offensive side of the ball. And honestly, Arthur, it's like the exact opposite approach of the Steelers. The Steelers, all the money's on the defensive side of the ball, leading the NFL in salary cap there. It's like the exact opposite approach. But it's just like, again, come playoff time when things slow down and fantasy football slows down November, December, January.
That's the interesting part, though, right? That's the interesting part, because for a lot of Steeler Nation late in the year, that's been their gripes. We don't want defense. We want to see you be able to score points. We think that it's more of an offensive league. So to see Cincinnati kind of fully lean into that approach, I'll be interested to see when we're going to get the return on that investment. Is it this season they get right back into the postseason? Because we saw last year, offense, you score a lot, but they end up falling short. Whereas for the Steelers, this defensive approach, archaic at times, it still led them to 10 wins. It still had them back in the postseason for another season. And that's the part where we're trying to see which version is going to, age out better. But we are very much polar opposites, like you brought up right there.
The balance is out of whack for both teams. I'm comfortable saying that.
Yeah.
In terms of roster construction. So, hey, we'll see. I wanted to ask you about, we got the draft coming up next month. You were picked by the Buffalo Bills in the 6th round. If you could share your draft story of what you were doing that day, what you remember from when you were selected. What was it? Is it back in 2010? Do I have that right?
Yeah, man. 2010. Heck yeah, man. So, shoot, for me, man, I always remember the draft because it was the first time that they had switched it to a 3-day process. So they did just the first round exclusively on one day. We knew we weren't going in the first round, so we weren't worried about it. It was like, yeah, we'll just watch the draft. But hey, we're definitely not even considering our phone rating. But we knew that, hey, due to Mel Kiper and how he had talked about me kind of leading up into the draft with the different, what my agent was saying and the different scouts, we knew we had a chance of going in the 3rd round. So the NFL did day 2 where it was just 2nd and 3rd round only. So we're like, all right, man, we'll go to Buffalo Wild Wings. And, where I was located at in my hometown, we had the camera crew with us because it was a big deal that I was going to be getting drafted. So, you sit there, Buffalo Wild Wings, 2nd round goes by, nothing. 3rd round goes by, nothing. You're like, all right, cool. But now it's time for, that final day 3 where you're going to do rounds 4 through 7. And tired of being in the restaurant, I'm like, yeah, we're going to take this to the house, go to my uncle's house. And it was like, hey, man, a little bit more, low key. But we still had the camera crews and stuff in there. So I just remember, man, fourth round goes by, no call. And I remember being upset because San Francisco, they were one of the teams that had really showed an interest in me, man. Me and Mike Singletary had, great conversations on my visit out there, but they ended up drafting Navarro Bowman. And at the time, I didn't know who Navarro Bowman was. I'm like, yo, who is this bum? I can't believe you drafted this guy. What are you doing? Newsflash. It was a great pick. It was a great pick. All right. I stand by it to this day. It's a great pick. Fifth round happens, though. And in the fifth round, I see, another guy, name is Larry Hart, man. It was a 1AA guy, and I thought that, man, no 1AA guy should get drafted before me that plays defense because I was the best at that level. He gets drafted. So now I'm like losing my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, man, like what's about to happen now? End of the fifth round, a punter gets selected, and I'm completely just in shambles. So I leave my family, I leave the camera crews. They're downstairs. I go upstairs. I'm having like the full-on pity party meltdown. Oh my God, a punter was drafted before me. I was supposed to be the defensive player of the year. Like, I'm supposed to be drafted. Like, man, what's about to happen? So, mind you, my mind has already fast forwarded to the draft is over. I'm not even playing in Canada. I'm about to go work at Walmart. No offense to anybody that works at Walmart, but me, that's where I had went, like in that span of, going upstairs. But lo and behold, the draft is still going on. My phone starts to ring, and it's the New York Giants. And at the time, they're saying, hey, man, we, have a pick later on in this round. We're going to be picking you, man. We're excited for you. All right. So I'm getting hyped now. I'm like, oh, shoot. All right. I got off the phone with them. Then Atlanta calls me. I'm like, yo, hello, who's this? It's like, yo, man, it's the Falcons. Man, we don't have a pick, but we're about to actually trade back in because we really want to draft you, man. We're really excited about you. So now I'm losing. I'm like, oh my God, I got two teams talking about to draft me. Like, I'm running downstairs to see my family. Well, the whole time, the Bills were trying to call me, but they couldn't because I was on the phone. So they called my mother's phone, RIP to her. She's answering it, talking to Buddy Nix, who was the GM at the time. Everybody downstairs is going crazy trying to figure out where I went. So she's trying to go to the front door to see where I'm at. I'm running downstairs and telling, hey, I'm on the phone with Atlanta. I'm on the phone with Atlanta. And they're like, yo, this the Bills. They're like drafting you right now. So mid-conversation with Atlanta, I hang up the phone, grab the phone from my mom. Buddy Nix is like, hey, man, Buddy Nix, general manager, want to welcome you to the team. And I'm just like, oh my God. I go to the TV, see my name going across the screen. And I just remember like being just overwhelmed with like emotion, falling down, like all my family laying up on me, like being excited. And it was one of the best moments ever. And yeah, my pops come out with the little hat. I'm like, oh my God, like I felt like so official, my Bill, like, and that was like the best feeling in the world. And then from there, you report for a rookie minicamp, and yeah, your life completely gets changed because you're like, oh, all right, I thought I was up here. Now I'm back to being down here again. All right. Yeah. Welcome to the league. Welcome to the league. But yeah, I would never forget it, man. It was a great experience for me and my family, man. And, just you put the bow on your work, right? And up until that point, that was my life's work. So to finally have that validation of, yes, every sacrifice, every decision that you made along the way now is validated by you getting this call on draft day. I will never forget that moment, man.
Unreal. That was an even better response than I was expecting. It was just like, you got to get through the direct line of communication where,
yeah, man, it was crazy. This like
what that's like. That's just, wow.
Like I said, great experience though, man. Like it's one of those things where you always think back and you say, man, you wish you would have got drafted early. But then I say, man, I think I got drafted where I needed to be drafted at. It provided a certain level of hunger that I needed throughout my career. It also gave me a chance to not mess up with the money. Because if I had the second contract, I got in Pittsburgh when I first get drafted, who knows, what I do, how I mentally focus, and things along that nature. Whereas by the time I got that contract, I'm just a lot more mature. I'm 4 or 5 years into the NFL, have a family, have a wife by then. And it was just a different dynamic, man. So, I always say everything happens for a reason. And that was one of those right there, man.
Was there ever any follow-up with the 49ers and Navarro Bowman and anyone in the 49ers front office?
So actually, I never got a chance to talk back with them. Obviously, we know Singletary. He stayed out there for, I think, 2 or 3 years before they ended up switching to Harbaugh. But I did actually get a chance to connect with Navarro Bowman, and we ended up joking about that story when I told him. I'm like, for the longest time, I didn't like you because I felt like, man, they drafted you instead of me because they thought you was better than me, and I always thought I was better than you up until I saw you start playing, and I was like, yep, you're better. You got the juice, man, and I'm man enough to say it. And to this day, I mean, it was a great dynamic, and for me, it was weird because I actually like indirectly had connected with all three of those linebackers from Navarro's team during that time at Penn State with Sean Lee, who locally lives, where I'm at in the Pittsburgh area. Josh Hall, who was his other linebacker during that time, we trained together coming out of the draft, and I would always get on him because I'm like, man, I'm nice to any Penn State linebacker because he was there. But then it was like, oh, man, I wasn't even thinking about Navarro. He gets drafted ahead of me. And then we finally connect on the back end. It's just like, oh, man, this is the crazy full circle moment. But
That's awesome.
That was, like I said, one of the things that I was really fortunate to, playing long enough and building those relationships with those guys, man. So, yeah, very, very fond of it. But, yeah, I will never forget those feelings. Yeah, Navarro, boy, how you going to take this guy? Oh, my God, you're crazy. He's not even the best from Penn State. All right.
All right, I got two things. We'll go quick. I promise we'll get you out of here. It's March Madness. Did you have any Steelers teammates that could hoop, that could ball? I know that there's the list of like Antoine Randall back in, but along the lines of, hey, we got NCAA tournament games this week. Who are your best teammates that could also play basketball?
Yeah. For me, man, I would definitely start with Cam Hayward. Man, big Cam, he's one of those freak athletes. He could do it all. In fact, if you go back, I want to say he played high-level AAU basketball as well down in the Georgia area. Yeah, like Cam, man, he's one of those just big athletes. He shouldn't be as nimble as he is for his size, and he plays with too much energy to be that big, if you catch my drift. It's like, Cam, you're going to hurt somebody out here. Like, he's that, but that's part of why he's so good with it as well, and he has good touch around the basket. So he would be the first guy. The other guy is, I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
Ben is great at everything, man. You watch him go on the basketball court. It's like, yo, you don't miss. You can dribble right hand, left hand. You could pass. Like, what can't you do? You take him out to the golf course. Man, you're going to just come out here to be a scratch golfer like it's nothing. Like, you could just wake up, just never play this course. He's gifted in every single. Oh, you want to throw trash balls into the trash can? All right, I could do that blindfolded, right? He's like, yo, what? So he's the other guy. But yeah, Cam, for certain, was one of those dudes where the first time I saw him play, I'm thinking, man, he's not going to be good like that. You just big for nothing. Like, I don't want to hear any of that. And you see him moving, you're like, got you now. Yep. I see it now. I see the difference. So, yeah, I would say those two dudes, man. Mm-hmm.
I've heard that about Ben. I think a lot of the great quarterbacks are just crazy competitors.
It's crazy, man. Yeah.
But Cam, it's 6'5". It kind of makes a lot of sense of he's very fundamentally sound in his technique along the defensive line. So in football, I mean, sometimes with the I'll call them the big sexies up front, sometimes they got it, sometimes they don't when it comes to
it's hit or miss. It's hit or miss.
Yeah. So that one surprised me a little bit, but like he's a solid 6'5", so that
it
makes
him has the height to play, and then you throw in the athleticism and then the physicality. Now you're talking about a guy that, if you're not ready for that, that's a long day. Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there a team you like in the tournament to win it?
Man, listen, I'm a sucker for the Duke Blue Devils, man. All right, I grew up a J.J. Redick fan when he was shooting from the logo. Before Steph Curry, it was J.J. I've been hooked ever since. So I'm going to roll with them. They did just win the ACC tournament over Louisville. So shout out to them Duke Blue Devils. So yeah, I'm going to ride with them. And of course, my dark horse candidate is always Norfolk State University. I got to represent the hometown team, man. 757. If you know, you know.
You're trying to break my heart because back in 2011, they upset my Missouri Tigers in their first round of the tournament.
Yes, sir.
He's a 15 seed. Oh, yeah, man. You're trying to kill me here. All right,
Mm-hmm.
Final topic of the show. Want to pay homage to the legendary Craig Wolfley, died at the age of 66. He's appeared here on this show multiple times. He's certainly going to be missed as the voice of the Steelers. Played for the team on the offensive line back in the 80s. I know we briefly talked. I know you knew Craig personally. I'm just going to turn things over to you, Arthur, to pay homage to a Steelers legend.
Yeah, man. Absolute Steelers legend, man, on and off the field. I always think back to my first time meeting Craig back in 2014 when I came from Buffalo to Pittsburgh. Him being a guy that, is a Buffalo native. The way that he talks about being up from, oh man, I know all about that, man. Let's talk about these wings. Let's talk about this. It's like, you're like, oh man, like, dude, you really know something about food. You really know something about these Buffalo Wild Wings up there. All right, let's go. But then the refreshing part when I always thought of Wolf was the fact that every time I would hear him break down players, every time I'd interact with him about football, it was always a positive perspective. Even if he was criticizing and talking about what a player might not have done well, it still was from a positive stance, a space of speaking life versus telling a player they're done, they're not good enough, they need to go find a new job, fire this player, which we do see so commonly in today's media profession. Those are the things that always stood out. But for me, man, I was very fortunate because, I had a great personal relationship with Wolf as well. He was one of my mentors. This is one of the guys that I had my first Pittsburgh radio show with. Hosted a show with him, man, my second year in Pittsburgh. Then from there, man, when I retired and I started working for Steelers Nation Radio, going on my 7th year now. Holy smokes, time has been flying. This is the guy that I would see every day because his show would end right before my show began. And yeah, he sat in the chair that I would sit in. So, from there, you think about all of those interactions and just his humility to where he would end the show and in the hallway, we're having a conversation. And he literally wants to ask me my perspective on a linebacker, my perspective on a scheme, my perspective on a player. And I'm always thinking to myself, like, Wolf, man, you played a decade plus in this thing. You've done media for, decade plus. You've called big game after big game, and you care about my opinion. And it would always just tickle me, man, to an extent to I'm just like, man, that's like so cool that a guy of his status looks at me and values my opinion to that level. And it would go back and forth. Just the constant conversations that I would have with him about offensive line play or just the schematics of what you're trying to key or read. And just how he was always just a resource to me, man, and a guy that would always show up and always be consistent. Those are the things that I just really, really am the most fond of. And I always tell myself, man, I'm just really blessed to have known him for as long as I did and to have that closeness that I had with him as well, man. And yeah, for certain, I'm going to miss the heck out of him. That big laugh, the big hugs he would give me every day, and how he would always have something to say about whatever hat I was wearing because I stay with a hat, but that was just part of our dynamic and our relationship. So that's why for me, man, I will always think so fondly of him whenever I think on my time with Craig Wolfley, man.
He had the gift of gab.
Oh, how absolutely, man.
He could describe battling a skunk in training camp or going up against Mean Joe Green, and it would be equally as entertaining.
Absolutely.
Incredible. He was incredible.
And he was so colorful with his wordplay. One of the true, last of a dying breed type of guys, man, that were able to do some of the stuff that you would hear John Madden do back in the day. Oh, oh, look at how this guy, man, his arms big as ham hocks, man. That it's like the way that they could say certain things that would make you so relate to you. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, it does kind of like a ham hock right there. Oh yeah, it does like the flat forehead society. Oh, I get it. Oh yeah, because he hits people. It makes all the sense now. Like those are the things that, he was so colorful at doing that, it is an art that has been lost a little bit in today's, commentary. But, that was, one of the things that made him. And I am so grateful for, his profession because we get this long, record of his voice, of his excitement, of his highs and his lows whenever we're wanting to hear from him, whenever we're feeling, we just miss him so much. Man, we can play you can play a Russell Wilson highlight. You're going to hear his voice. Play Justin Wilson highlight from last year. You're going to hear his voice. And that's the cool part, about, what he was doing while he was here. And, just true testament to his impact and his legacy.
Arms for legs and legs for tree trunks was one of my favorite ones, man. And I'll leave it with this too. When Myron Cope was before my time, but listening to Craig Wolfley, his relationship with Tunchilkin, but also I put in, when I was listening to Craig and Bill Hillgrove, it just felt like I was watching or listening to a Steelers game. And that's the best compliment I could give because it just felt like Pittsburgh Steelers football, and their voices are synonymous with Pittsburgh Steelers football.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Legends. Like you said, RIP to Tunch, RIP to Wolf. If you know, those were like brothers. And then when you talk about Billy Hillgrove, man, what a time, man, what an era. And I'm just glad that we all got a chance to experience it, man. And even if you didn't when it was happening in real time, the archives are still available. All right. You can always go back and re-listen and, relive some of those moments, man, some of that excitement, some of those just insane, things that transpired, and they were the ones that were painting that picture for us. And that's why we are so, when we think of them so fondly, because their voice were the narrators to some of the best emotional moments that we've had as fans.
Well said. He's the one and only Arthur Moats. Arthur, you've been extremely gracious with your time.
Man, always a blast. You know that.
Yeah, man. If there's anything that you need to plug with what you're doing, the floor is yours.
Man, well, you already know, man. Website is arthurmoats.com, man. You'll see all the content there. Check me out on YouTube. Just type in my name, Arthur Moats. Can't miss the page, man, and you'll see everything that we have going on. Steelers related, Bills related, and then even sneaker related for my fashion heads out there as well, man. So that's what we have going on right now, man.
I'm going to have to rep a fancy jersey when I come on your show this week because I see what you got over there. But
little Charlie Conway, shout out to my Mighty Ducks fans out there, all right?
Yeah. I'm excited to talk with you on your show later this week, so check that out. He's the one and only Arthur Moats. If you enjoyed Bleav in Steelers, 5 stars only, Apple and Spotify. On YouTube, hit the subscribe button, Mark Bergin, and on the Bleav Network. Thank you to today's presenting sponsor, BetOnline.ag. Thank you to Arthur Moats. My name is Mark Bergin. I'll see you later this week. Until then, take care. So long, everybody.